December 7th, 1941, 7:48 in the morning, Honolulu, Hawaii, a Sunday. Most kids were still asleep. Parents were making coffee. Some families were getting ready for church. In 18 days, it would be Christmas. Nobody was thinking about war. War was something happening in Europe, something happening in China. Not here, not on American soil. At 7:55, 183 Japanese aircraft appeared over Pearl Harbor. Dive bombers, torpedo planes, fighters. They came out of the clouds, and within seconds, the entire island became a battlefield. 8-year-old Dorothy Edgers woke up to an explosion that threw her out of bed. The windows in her room shattered, glass everywhere. She hit the floor and cut her hands trying to stand up. Her mother ran in, grabbed her by the arm, dragged her into the hallway. Dorothy looked at her mother's face and saw something she had never seen before. Pure terror. Her mother was screaming, but Dorothy could not hear the words. Her ears were ringing from the blast. All she could hear was a high-pitched whine and the muffled sound of more explosions outside. They ran to the basement. Her father was already there. He was holding a radio, but it was not working. The power was out. He kept turning the dial anyway. His hands were shaking. Dorothy asked what was happening. Her father did not answer. He just stared at the ceiling as the house shook again and again. Across the harbor, 10-year-old Robert Kinsler was already outside when the attack started. He heard the planes before he saw them. Low, fast, loud. He looked up and saw the red circle on the wings, the rising sun. He did not know what it meant yet, but he knew it was wrong. Then he saw the bombs drop. Not one, not two, dozens. They fell in a line toward Hickam Field where his father worked. Robert stood there and watched them fall. He did not run. He did not scream. He just watched. The first bomb hit the airfield, and the fireball rose so high, Robert thought it touched the clouds. Then the second. Then the third. Black smoke poured into the sky. Robert could feel the heat from where he was standing. Half a mile away. He could feel it on his face. That was when he started running. Not toward his house, toward the base. His father was there. His father was in that smoke. His mother caught him before he made it to the street. She tackled him. Literally tackled him to the ground. She was screaming at him to get inside, but Robert was fighting her. He was kicking and punching and screaming that his father was burning. His mother dragged him into the house by his shirt collar and locked the door. Robert ran to the window and pressed his face against the glass. All he could see was smoke, thick, black, endless. At 8:06, the USS Arizona exploded. A bomb penetrated its forward magazine and detonated over 1 million pounds of gunpowder in an instant. The explosion was so massive that people felt it 20 miles away. Windows shattered across Honolulu. Car alarms went off. The ground shook like an earthquake. 1,177 men died on that ship in less than 9 minutes. 9 minutes. Most of them never made it above deck. They drowned in the dark as the ship sank in 40 feet of water. 11-year-old Marianne Ramsey watched the Arizona explode from her backyard. She and her younger brother had climbed onto the roof of a shed to see what was happening. From there, they had a clear view of the harbor. When the Arizona blew, the fireball was so bright, Marianne thought the sun had fallen out of the sky. She closed her eyes, but she could still see it, burned into her vision, a white light that would not go away. Her brother started crying. Marianne did not cry. She just stood there watching the smoke rise. watching pieces of metal rain down into the water, watching men jump off burning ships. Some of them were on fire. Their uniforms, their skin. They jumped into the water and disappeared. Marianne watched all of it. She did not look away. Years later, she said she could not look away. Her eyes were locked on the harbor. She stood on that roof for 20 minutes. When her mother finally came outside and screamed at them to get down, Marianne realized she had wet herself. She had been standing there so long, her bladder gave out, and she did not even notice. By 9, the harbor was a graveyard. 18 ships were sunk or damaged. 347 aircraft destroyed. 2,403 Americans dead. Another 1,178 wounded. The water was covered in oil. It was on fire. Bodies floated in the flames. Some of them were still moving. 12-year-old Samuel Kahala lived near the harbor entrance. He and 3 other boys ran down to the beach during the attack to see what was happening. They thought it was a training exercise at first. They thought it was the American military practicing. Then they saw the bodies. The first one washed up near their feet, a sailor, face down in the water. His back was burned black. The skin was peeling off. One of the boys threw up. Another started crying. Samuel just stood there, staring. He had never seen a dead person before. He reached out to touch the body, to see if it was real. His friend grabbed his arm and pulled him back. They ran, all 4 of them. They ran home and did not stop. Samuel did not tell his parents what he saw. He went to his room and sat on the bed. He did not move, did not speak. His mother came in to check on him and asked if he was okay. He said yes, but he was not okay. That night, he could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the sailor, face down, burned, floating. He got up and went to the bathroom and threw up. He did that 3 times before morning. The attack lasted less than 2 hours. By 10, the Japanese planes were gone. The sirens stopped. The explosions stopped. Everything went quiet, but the smoke kept rising. It hung over the island for days. The smell was unbearable. Burning oil, burning rubber, burning flesh. It got into everything. Clothes, hair, skin. You could taste it when you ate. You could smell it when you breathed. Kids on Oahu lived in that smell for weeks. Dorothy Edger's father finally got the radio working that afternoon. The first thing they heard was President Roosevelt's voice. He said the United States had been attacked, that we were now at war. Dorothy asked her father what that meant. He said it meant everything was going to change. He was right. By the next day, every major city on the West Coast was preparing for attack. Air raid sirens were installed overnight. Schools were turned into evacuation centers. Parents were told to prepare emergency kits, to blacken their windows at night, to teach their children how to hide. On December 9th, San Francisco held its first air raid drill. 750,000 people were sent home from work and school. The city went completely dark. No lights, no cars, sirens wailing. Parents grabbed their kids and ran to basements, to closets, to bathtubs, anywhere underground. 10-year-old James O'Brien from Brooklyn remembered the first time the sirens went off in his neighborhood. It was 2 a.m. He was asleep. The sound cut through the silence like a scream. His father burst into his room, scooped him up, ran him down to the basement. His mother was already there with his baby sister. They sat in the dark, waiting. His father tried to explain what was happening, but James could tell his father did not know either. That was the worst part. seeing his father scared. The fear was real. After Pearl Harbor, Americans believed the West Coast could be next. There were reports of Japanese submarines off California. On December 20th, a Japanese sub surfaced near Santa Barbara and fired 25 shells at an oil refinery. Most of them missed, but the message was clear. The war was not far away. The war was here. The war could come to your backyard at any moment. By the end of 1942, over 2 million child-sized gas masks were distributed across the United States. Kids as young as 5 had to learn how to put one on in under 30 seconds. Teachers held gas mask drills every week. If you could not do it fast enough, you practiced until you could. Imagine being 6 years old and being told that poison gas might fall from the sky. That your survival depends on how fast you can strap rubber onto your face. That if you are too slow, you die. Schools also started duck and cover drills. If you see a flash, drop to the ground, cover your head, stay down. Teachers explained that bombs could come without warning, that you might not have time to run, that the best chance of survival was to get low and protect your neck. Every week, the teacher would shout, "Drop," and every kid in the room would hit the floor. Hands over heads, your eyes closed, waiting. By 1943, 16 million American children had done this drill. 16 million. Almost every school-age kid in the country. Dorothy Edgers never slept peacefully again. Every time she heard a plane, even years later, her body went rigid. Her heart raced. She would stop whatever she was doing and scan the sky for red circles. She was 8 years old, and she had learned that the sky could kill you. Robert Kinsler found out his father survived. He came home that night covered in soot, shaking. He smelled like smoke and gasoline. He did not talk about what he saw. He just hugged Robert and did not let go. Robert asked if the Japanese were coming back. His father said he did not know. Robert stopped sleeping in his own bed after that. He slept on the floor of his parents' room. He wanted to be close. He wanted to be ready. Marianne Ramsey became obsessed with planes. She would sit outside for hours watching the sky. She learned to identify aircraft by their shape, by their sound. She needed to know if they were friendly or not. Her parents thought it was strange. They thought she would be afraid of planes. But she was not afraid. She was vigilant. She had learned you cannot trust the sky. You have to watch it. December 7, 1941, was the day American children learned that home is not safe, that war does not stay far away, that you can wake up in peacetime and go to bed in hell. And for the next 4 years, those children grew up in a country that went to bed every night, wondering if the sirens would sound before morning. By the end of the first week, 12 children in Honolulu were dead. Not from bombs, from accidents in the chaos, from fear, from running into the street and getting hit by cars, from heart attacks brought on by terror. 12 kids, dead, in 1 week, and the war had only just begun. By the summer of 1942, bomb shelters were everywhere. Not just in Hawaii, not just on the coasts, everywhere. Families in Ohio were digging holes in their backyards. Families in Kansas were reinforcing their basements with concrete. Families in Nevada were stockpiling canned food and bottled water like the apocalypse was coming next Tuesday. And maybe it was. Nobody knew. That was the problem. Nobody knew when the next attack would come or where it would hit. So people prepared for the worst. The government told Americans to build shelters. President Roosevelt said it was a civic duty. Pamphlets were distributed. Blueprints were handed out. Civil defense offices opened in every major city. By the end of 1942, over 2.5 million American families had either built or prepared some kind of bomb shelter. 2.5 million. That is 1 out of every 12 households in the country. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Most of those shelters were garbage. They were built by regular people with no engineering experience. A dad and his teenage son digging a hole in the backyard and covering it with plywood and dirt. A mom stacking sandbags in the basement corner and calling it a shelter. These were not military bunkers. These were homemade death traps that gave families a false sense of security while the government sold them a fantasy of survival. 14-year-old Helen Kowalski from Detroit remembered the day her father decided to build a shelter. It was March 1942, 3 months after Pearl Harbor. Her father came home from work one day with a shovel, a bag of cement, and a government pamphlet titled How to Build a Family Fallout Shelter in 7 Easy Steps. He told Helen and her 2 brothers they were going to dig right there, in the backyard, under the apple tree. They dug for 2 weeks, every night after dinner. Her father, her brothers, even Helen. They dug a hole 8 feet deep, 10 feet long, 6 feet wide. It was supposed to fit the whole family, plus their dog. When they were done digging, they poured concrete on the floor. Then they built wooden walls and a wooden ceiling. Then they covered the ceiling with dirt. 2 feet of dirt. That was supposed to protect them from bombs. 2 feet of dirt and some plywood. When it was finished, Helen's father stood back and looked at it like he had built the Hoover Dam. He was proud. He had protected his family. He made them all go inside to test it out. It was dark. It smelled like wet dirt and rotting wood. There was one small vent pipe sticking out of the ground for air. Helen's mother brought down blankets and pillows. Her father brought down a radio and a lantern. They sat there in the dark for an hour just to see what it would feel like. Helen's younger brother started crying after 10 minutes. He said he could not breathe. Her mother said he was fine. But Helen could tell her mother was struggling too. The air was thick, heavy. It felt like the walls were closing in. They never used that shelter. Not once. It flooded during the first heavy rain. 3 feet of muddy water filled the hole and destroyed everything inside. Her father tried to pump it out, but the walls collapsed. The whole thing caved in. He spent 2 weeks building it, and it lasted 3 months. After that, he never talked about it again. But Helen remembered. She remembered sitting in that dark hole, thinking this is where we are supposed to die if the bombs come. This is where we are supposed to wait while the world ends above us. Across the country, families were having the same experience. Building shelters that did not work. Spending money they did not have on supplies they would never use. The government told them a basic shelter could be built for $50. That was a lie. Most families spent $200 to $300. Some spent over $1,000. And for what? A hole in the ground that flooded in the rain. A basement corner stacked with sandbags that would do nothing against a real bomb. A backyard bunker that would collapse if you sneezed too hard. But people kept building them because the alternative was doing nothing, and doing nothing felt like giving up, like waiting to die. So they dug. They poured cement. They stockpiled canned beans and bottled water. They convinced themselves that if the bombs came, they would be ready. 13-year-old Thomas O'Malley from Los Angeles lived in a house with no basement. His family could not afford to dig a backyard shelter. So his father converted a closet, a coat closet, 6 feet by 4 feet. He ripped out the rod where the coats hung and bolted metal shelves to the walls. He stocked those shelves with canned food, water jugs, flashlights, batteries, a first aid kit, and a bucket. The bucket was for going to the bathroom, because if the bombs came, they would be in that closet for days, maybe weeks. Thomas's father made them practice. Once a month, the whole family would cram into that closet and shut the door. Thomas, his parents, his 2 younger sisters, 5 people in a 6 by 4 foot space. They would sit there in the dark for an hour, sometimes longer. His father would set a timer. He said they needed to know what it would feel like. They needed to be ready. Thomas hated those drills more than anything. The closet was suffocating. His little sister would always start crying within the first 15 minutes. His mother would try to calm her down, but her voice was shaking. You could hear it, the fear, the claustrophobia. Thomas would close his eyes and try to imagine he was somewhere else, anywhere else, but he could not. He could hear everyone breathing. He could smell the sweat. He could feel his sister's elbow digging into his ribs. And every time he thought the same thing. If the bombs really come, this is where we die. Not outside, not in the street, in this closet, in the dark, together. They practiced that drill for 3 years, once a month, every month. By 1945, Thomas could sit in that closet for 2 hours without moving, without speaking, without panicking. He had trained himself to shut down, to go numb. Years later, he said that closet ruined him. Even as an adult, he could not be in small spaces, could not ride in elevators, could not sleep with the door closed. That closet taught him what it felt like to be buried alive while you were still breathing. But at least Thomas's family had a plan. Millions of families did not even have that. They had no shelter, no supplies, no idea what to do if the sirens went off. In rural areas, people were told to go to the nearest ditch and lie flat. In cities, they were told to go to the basement of the nearest large building. But what if there was no ditch? What if there was no building? What if you were just a kid walking home from school when the bombs started falling? 9-year-old Alice Brennan from Philadelphia asked her teacher that exact question. It was during a school assembly in April 1942. A civil defense officer was explaining duck and cover drills. He said, "If you see a flash of light, drop to the ground immediately. Cover your head and neck. Do not look at the flash. Do not run. Just drop." Alice raised her hand and asked, "What if I am on a bridge when it happens? What if there is nowhere to drop?" The officer paused. He looked at her. He said, "Then you pray." The whole auditorium went silent. Alice sat back down. She never asked another question. By 1943, air raid drills were a weekly routine in every school across America. 16 million children participated. When the bell rang, you dropped. No hesitation, no questions. You hit the floor, covered your head, and stayed down until the teacher said it was safe. Some schools had designated shelter areas in the basement. Others just had you hide under your desk, as if a wooden desk would protect you from a bomb that could level a building. Kids learned to live with the drills. They learned to live with the fear, but it changed them. 12-year-old Barbara Flynn from Boston started having nightmares. Every night, the same dream. She would be at school. The sirens would go off. She would try to run, but her legs would not move. She would watch the other kids disappear into the basement and she would be stuck, frozen. Then the bombs would hit. She would wake up screaming, soaked in sweat. Her mother would come in and hold her, tell her it was just a dream. But it did not feel like a dream. It felt real, because it could be real at any moment. Barbara was not the only one. A study conducted in 1945 by the Office of War Information found that 67% of children in coastal states experience nightmares related to bombing or invasion. 67%, more than half. These were not children living in a war zone. These were American kids living in American cities that had never been attacked. But the fear was so real, so constant, that their minds created the war in their sleep. Some families tried to make the shelters feel normal, homey, safe. 15-year-old Margaret Walsh from San Francisco remembered her mother decorating their basement shelter like it was a guest bedroom. She hung curtains, put down a rug, brought in a small table with a vase of fake flowers. She even hung pictures on the walls, pictures of the family at the beach, at Christmas, smiling, happy, as if pretending the shelter was a nice place would somehow make it less terrifying. But it did not work. Margaret said the decorations just made it worse, because no matter how many curtains you hung or how many fake flowers you put on the table, you still knew what that room was for. It was for hiding, for waiting, for hoping the bombs did not fall on your house. And every time Margaret went down there for a drill, she would look at those pictures on the wall and think about how fragile everything was, how fast it could all disappear. The worst part was not knowing when it would end. The drills, the fear, the waiting. Kids went to school every day, not knowing if they would make it home. Parents went to work, not knowing if their house would still be standing when they got back. And everyone just kept going, kept pretending things were normal. Because what else could you do? By the time the war ended in 1945, millions of American children had spent years living in a state of constant readiness, constant fear. They had practiced dying. They had imagined their own death so many times that it stopped feeling like imagination. It felt like inevitability. And even after the war ended, even after the sirens stopped and the shelters were abandoned, that feeling never fully went away. Those kids grew up. They had families of their own. And decades later, they still flinched when they heard loud noises, still checked the sky when planes flew overhead, still remembered what it felt like to sit in the dark and wait for the end of the world. By the summer of 1940, Britain was dying. Not slowly, not quietly. London was being bombed every single night. German planes came in waves, hundreds of them. They dropped incendiary bombs that turned entire neighborhoods into infernos. High explosive bombs that flattened buildings in seconds. Parachute mines that drifted down silently and exploded with enough force to level city blocks. The Blitz lasted 8 months. 43,000 civilians killed. Over 1 million homes destroyed, and the children saw all of it. The British government knew they had to do something. They could not stop the bombs. They could not win the air war. But they could save the kids. So in June 1940, they launched the Children's Overseas Reception Board. The plan was simple: ship as many children as possible out of Britain before the bombs killed them all. Send them to Canada, Australia, South Africa, America, anywhere that was not being bombed. By the end of 1941, over 3,000 British children had been evacuated to the United States. 3,000 kids packed onto ships and sent across the Atlantic with nothing but a suitcase and a tag pinned to their chest with their name and destination. Most of them were under 12 years old. Some were as young as 5. They left their parents behind, left their homes, left everything, because staying meant dying. 11-year-old Margaret Hastings from London was one of those kids. She boarded a ship in Liverpool in August 1940 with her younger brother and 200 other children. None of them knew where they were going. The government would not tell them. It was classified. If the Germans found out which ships were carrying children, they would sink them. So the kids were just told to get on the boat and be quiet. The crossing took 12 days. Margaret remembered standing on the deck the first night and looking back at England. She could see the glow on the horizon, orange and red, the fires, London burning. Her mother was still there. Her father was fighting in France. She did not know if she would ever see them again. She stood there, watching the glow get smaller and smaller until it disappeared. Then she went below deck and cried until she fell asleep. When the ship arrived in New York, the children were processed like refugees. American families had volunteered to take them in, to house them, to feed them, to keep them safe until the war ended. Margaret and her brother were sent to a family in Connecticut. A nice family, a big house, clean beds, hot food every night. It was paradise compared to London, but Margaret could not enjoy it, because every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fires, heard the sirens, smelled the smoke. She had escaped the Blitz, but the Blitz had not escaped her. American kids did not understand what Margaret had been through. They could not. They had never seen a bomb, never heard one, never run to a shelter while the ground shook and the buildings collapsed around them. So when Margaret tried to explain what it was like, they did not believe her. They thought she was exaggerating, making it up, trying to sound tough. One day at school, a boy asked Margaret what London was like during the Blitz. She told him the truth. She said the bombs fell every night, that you could hear them whistling as they came down, that the explosions were so loud they made your ears bleed, that entire streets disappeared in seconds, that you would go to bed not knowing if your house would still be standing in the morning. The boy laughed. He said she was lying. He said bombs do not make your ears bleed. Margaret did not say anything. She just stared at him. Then she pulled up her sleeve and showed him the scar on her arm. Shrapnel, from a bomb that hit 3 houses down from hers. The boy stopped laughing. But most American kids did not have scars. They did not have proof. So the British children learned to stop talking about it. They learned that Americans did not want to hear about the real war. They wanted to hear about bravery, about Winston Churchill, about the Royal Air Force shooting down German planes. They did not want to hear about the 7-year-old girl who suffocated to death in a collapsed bomb shelter because the rescue workers could not dig her out in time. They did not want to hear about the mother who threw herself on top of her baby to shield it from shrapnel, and they both died anyway. They did not want to hear the truth, so the British children stopped telling it. But then, Pearl Harbor happened, December 7th, 1941, and suddenly American kids were scared. Suddenly, they were the ones doing air raid drills, building bomb shelters, wondering if the bombs would fall on their houses, and they started asking the British kids questions. Real questions. What does it feel like? What do you do? How do you survive? 13-year-old William Fletcher from Manchester had been living with a family in Pennsylvania for over a year when Pearl Harbor was attacked. The day after, his American host family sat him down and asked him to tell them everything: what to expect, how to prepare, how to keep the children safe. William did not want to talk about it. He had spent a year trying to forget, but they insisted, so he told them. He told them about the sirens, how you heard them every night, sometimes twice a night, how you learned to recognize the sound of German bombers by their engine pitch, a low, steady drone that got louder and louder until it felt like the sky was falling. He told them about the shelters, how you ran, how you grabbed whatever you could carry, how you left everything else behind, how you sat in the dark with strangers and listened to the bombs fall and prayed yours was not next. He told them about the morning after, walking through your neighborhood and seeing which houses were still there and which were gone. Seeing the rescue workers digging through rubble looking for survivors, hearing people scream, seeing bodies covered in dust, in blood, in nothing because there was nothing left to cover. He told them about his best friend, David, 10 years old. They played football together every day after school until the night a bomb hit David's house. Direct hit. The entire building collapsed. They found David 3 days later, buried under the rubble, still holding his football. William stopped talking after that. His host family did not ask any more questions. But not all British children stayed quiet. Some of them wanted American kids to understand, to really understand what war meant. 14-year-old Elizabeth Shaw from Birmingham was sent to a school in Massachusetts. She was asked to give a presentation to her class about life in Britain during the war. She stood in front of 30 American kids and told them everything. No filter, no softening, just the truth. She told them about the night her house was hit. She was in the shelter in the backyard with her mother and 2 younger sisters. Her father was on the roof, trying to put out incendiary bombs with a bucket of sand. That was what you did. If a small bomb landed on your roof, you went up and put it out before it burned your house down. But her father did not see the second bomb. It was a high explosive. It hit the house, and the entire building came down. Her father was on the roof when it collapsed. Elizabeth heard the explosion, felt the ground shake, ran out of the shelter and saw her house was gone. Just gone. A pile of bricks and wood and dust. She started screaming for her father. Her mother tried to pull her back, but Elizabeth broke free. She ran to the rubble and started digging with her hands, pulling bricks away, throwing them behind her. Her hands were bleeding. Her nails were torn off. She did not stop. She dug for an hour until the rescue workers arrived and pulled her away. They found her father 2 hours later. He was still alive, barely. His legs were crushed, his ribs were broken, his skull was fractured. He died in the hospital 3 days later. Elizabeth told that story to her American classmates. She told them that war is not exciting. It is not heroic. It is watching your father die because a bomb fell on your house. It is digging through rubble with your bare hands, knowing he is under there somewhere. It is going to his funeral and realizing you will never see him again. It is living the rest of your life with that memory burned into your brain. She finished her presentation and sat down. The classroom was silent. Nobody said a word. Some of the girls were crying. The boys just stared. The teacher thanked Elizabeth and dismissed the class early. Nobody talked to Elizabeth for a week after that. She had told them the truth, and they did not know what to do with it. But Elizabeth did not regret it, because a week later, one of the boys from her class came up to her and said thank you. He said his family had been building a bomb shelter in their basement, and he thought it was stupid. He thought his parents were overreacting. But after hearing Elizabeth's story, he understood. He understood that war does not care if you are ready. It does not care if you are scared. It does not care if you are a kid or an adult, or if you have never hurt anyone in your life. It just comes, and when it does, you either survive or you do not. By 1943, many of the British children were still in America. The war was not over. The bombs were still falling. Their parents told them to stay, to be safe, to wait it out. But some of the kids wanted to go back. They missed home. They missed their families. They felt guilty for being safe while their parents and siblings were still in danger. 12-year-old Thomas Greenwood from Liverpool begged his host family to send him back. He had been in America for 2 years. His parents wrote him letters every week telling him they were fine, that he should stay in America where it was safe. But Thomas did not believe them. He knew they were lying. He knew the bombs were still falling. He knew people were dying, and he could not stand being an ocean away while his family was in danger. In June 1943, Thomas finally got permission to return. He boarded a ship in New York with 50 other British children who were going home. The crossing was dangerous. German submarines were everywhere. The ship traveled in a convoy with naval escorts. At night, they had to black out all the lights. No smoking on deck, no flashlights, nothing that could give away their position. Thomas spent the entire voyage terrified that a torpedo would hit them, that he would drown in the middle of the Atlantic after surviving 2 years of war. But the ship made it. Thomas arrived in Liverpool in July 1943. His parents were waiting at the dock. His mother saw him and started crying. His father just held him, did not say a word, just held him. They walked back to their house, or what was left of it. The entire street had been bombed. Half the houses were gone. Thomas's house was still standing, but barely. The roof was partially collapsed. The windows were blown out. The front door was hanging off its hinges, but it was home. Thomas walked inside and saw his room. His bed was still there, covered in dust and broken glass. His books were on the shelf. His toys were in the corner. Everything was exactly how he left it 2 years ago, except it was not, because everything had changed. The war had changed it, had changed him. He was 12 years old, and he had seen more death and destruction than most adults ever would, and he knew it was not over. The bombs were still... The war did not just take lives. It took normalcy. It took childhood. It took the small moments that make life worth living. Birthday parties, family dinners, bedtime stories, games in the backyard, all of it disappeared, replaced by fear, by rationing, by sirens, by waiting. But some families refused to let the war take everything. They fought back in the only way they could, with small acts of defiance, with little moments of humanity that reminded them they were still alive, until the war took those two. 13-year-old Sarah Mitchell from Portland, Oregon, turned 14 on March 3, 1943. Her father was fighting in Europe. Her older brother was in the Pacific. Her mother worked 12-hour shifts at a munitions factory. There was no money for a birthday party, no sugar for a cake, no time to celebrate. But her mother tried anyway. The night before Sarah's birthday, her mother came home at midnight. Sarah was already asleep. Her mother went into the kitchen and started baking. She had been saving sugar rations for 3 months. A teaspoon here, a tablespoon there, hoarding it like gold. She also had flour, eggs from a neighbor's chicken, no butter, just lard, and vanilla extract she had been saving since before the war. She mixed the ingredients in a bowl. No recipe, just memory. She poured the batter into a pan and put it in the oven. Then she sat at the kitchen table and waited. She had not slept in 20 hours. Her hands were stained black from gunpowder residue. Her feet were swollen. Her back ached. But she sat there waiting for the cake to bake. At 1 a.m, she pulled the cake out. It was lopsided, burned on one side. But it was a cake. She did not have frosting, so she melted a chocolate bar she had been saving and poured it over the top. It pooled in the middle and dripped down the sides. She stuck a candle in the center. One candle. That was all she had. The next morning, Sarah woke up to her mother standing in her doorway holding the cake. The candle was lit. Her mother was crying. Not sad crying, exhausted crying. The kind that happens when you are so tired, your emotions leak out whether you want them to or not. She set the cake down on Sarah's bed and sang Happy Birthday. Her voice cracked halfway through. Sarah stared at the cake, at the burned edges, at the uneven chocolate, at the single candle flickering in the dim light, and she started crying too. She did not cry because the cake was ugly. She cried because her mother had stayed up all night to make it, because her father was not there, because her brother was not there, because this was what birthdays look like now. Lopsided cakes and single candles and mothers who cried while they sang. But it was still a birthday. It was still something. Sarah blew out the candle, made a wish. Her mother cut the cake. They ate it for breakfast, just the two of them. It tasted terrible, dry and bitter and burned, but Sarah ate every bite. 3 weeks later, a telegram arrived. Her brother had been killed in the Pacific, shot down over the ocean. No body recovered, no grave, just gone. Sarah's mother collapsed when she read it, the same way she had stood with the cake. But this time there was no crying, just silence. Sarah found the telegram on the floor. She picked it up, read it. Then she walked to her room and looked at the burned cake pan still sitting on her dresser. She had kept it, unwashed, because it was the last thing her mother had made before everything fell apart. She picked up the pan and threw it against the wall. It dented, did not break, just dented. Sarah left it on the floor, did not pick it up, and she never celebrated her birthday again. The small acts did not protect anyone. They just made the loss hurt more. In December 1942, the family in Newark, New Jersey, received a telegram. Their son, Private Michael Donovan, had been killed in action in North Africa. He was 19 years old. The telegram arrived 3 days before Christmas. Michael's younger brother, 10-year-old Kevin, watched his mother collapse when she read it. She dropped to the floor, did not scream, did not cry, just folded in on herself like something inside her had broken. Kevin's father stood there, staring at the telegram. His hands were shaking. He crumpled the paper and threw it across the room. Then he walked out. Kevin did not see him for 2 days. Kevin did not know what to do. His mother would not get off the floor. His father was gone. His older sister locked herself in her room. So Kevin did the only thing he could think of. He took care of the house. He was 10 years old and he became the adult. He cooked meals, burned most of them, made eggs, toast, soup from a can. He brought food to his mother. She would not eat. He left it next to her anyway. He brought food to his sister. She threw it at the door. He cleaned it up and brought more the next day. He did the dishes, swept the floors, took out the trash. He did not go to school. He stayed home and kept the house running because no one else could. On the 3rd day, his father came back. He smelled like alcohol. His eyes were red. He walked into the kitchen and saw Kevin washing dishes, saw the food Kevin had made, saw the house still standing, even though everything inside it was broken. He sat down at the table and started crying. Kevin had never seen his father cry. Not once. He did not know what to do, so he walked over and put his hand on his father's shoulder. Did not say anything, just stood there. His father grabbed his hand and held it, squeezed so hard it hurt, but Kevin did not pull away. That night, Kevin's mother finally got off the floor. She went to the bathroom, washed her face, came into the kitchen and saw the food Kevin had made, the dishes he had washed. She looked at him and said thank you. Then she sat down and ate. It was the first thing she had eaten in 3 days. Kevin sat across from her and watched, making sure she kept going, making sure she did not stop. Kevin kept his family alive for 3 days, but years later, he found out the truth. Michael did not die in North Africa like the telegram said. He died 3 weeks earlier, shot in the back while retreating. The army lied, made it sound heroic, made it sound like he died fighting. But Michael died running, scared, alone. Kevin found out when a soldier from Michael's unit tracked him down 30 years later and told him. The soldier said he was there, said he watched Michael get shot, said he tried to help, but there was nothing he could do. Kevin listened, nodded, thanked the man for coming. Then he went home and locked himself in his room and did not come out for 2 days. His wife knocked on the door, asked if he was okay. Kevin said yes, but he was not okay. He had spent 30 years believing his brother was a hero, and now he knew the truth, that the war did not make heroes, it just made bodies, and the ones who survived carried the lie for the rest of their lives. Kevin never told his mother. She died believing her son was a hero. Kevin let her believe it, because sometimes the lie is kinder than the truth. But some acts of humanity came from strangers, from people who had no reason to care, but did anyway, until they learned that caring was not enough. In August 1943, a train carrying wounded soldiers stopped in a small town in Nebraska. The train was heading east, back to hospitals, back to families, back to whatever was left of their lives. The soldiers had been fighting in Italy. Some were missing limbs, some were burned, some were so damaged you could not tell what happened to them. The train stopped for 20 minutes, just long enough to refuel. The townspeople heard it was coming, heard it was carrying wounded boys, so they showed up, hundreds of them. They lined the platform. They brought food, homemade bread, cookies, sandwiches, lemonade. They walked up to the train and handed food through the windows. The soldiers did not know what to do. Some of them cried. Some tried to pay. The townspeople refused. They just kept handing food through the windows, smiling, saying thank you, saying welcome home. One of the soldiers was 19-year-old Danny Pierce from Ohio. He had been shot in the stomach, nearly died, spent 2 months in a field hospital. He had not eaten real food in weeks. When an old woman handed him a sandwich through the window, he stared at it like it was a miracle. She smiled and said, "Eat up, honey. You are home now." Danny bit into the sandwich and started crying. He could not stop. He sat there with a sandwich in one hand and tears running down his face. Because for the first time in months, someone had been kind to him. Someone had reminded him that people still cared, that he was still human. The train pulled away. Danny waved at the old woman through the window. She waved back. He finished the sandwich, closed his eyes, fell asleep. 3 hours later, his wounds reopened. Internal bleeding. The medics on the train tried to stop it. They could not. Danny bled out in his seat. He was 19 years old. He died 3 hours from home. The sandwich was the last good thing he ever tasted. The old woman kept making sandwiches every time a train came through. For years, she never knew that one of the boys she fed did not make it. Never knew that her kindness was the last thing he felt before he died. Her daughter found out decades later when a historian researching the train routes tracked her down and told her the story. The daughter cried, said her mother never talked about the war, never mentioned the soldiers, never told anyone what she did. She just did it because it was the right thing. The daughter asked the historian if her mother's sandwich mattered, if it made a difference. The historian said yes. It was the last moment Danny felt loved. The last moment he felt like a person instead of a casualty. The daughter nodded, but she could not stop thinking about how her mother had spent years making sandwiches for boys who were already dying. How kindness could not save anyone. It just made the dying a little less lonely. The old woman never found out that one of the boys she fed died on the way home. She just kept coming to the station, making sandwiches because she believed it was the right thing to do. But kindness did not stop the bleeding. It did not turn the train around. It did not bring anyone back. It only made the dying a little less lonely. And yet, as long as someone kept showing up with food at the platforms, baking lopsided cakes, holding broken families together, the war could never quite kill everything human inside them. These were only some of the small acts people used to fight a war they could not control. But sometimes the acts were not kind. Sometimes they were reckless, stupid, driven by desperation and the refusal to let the war win. And sometimes those acts saved lives in ways no one could have predicted. In 1944, a 10-year-old boy in Baltimore named Marcus found his neighbor collapsed in the street. Heart attack. The man was 60 years old, clutching his chest, face turning blue. Marcus had no medical training, had never seen anyone dying before. But he had read a book, a single book from his school library about the human body. He remembered a page about the heart, about compressions, about keeping blood moving until help arrived. Marcus dropped to his knees, put his hands on the man's chest, started pushing. He did not know if he was doing it right, did not know if it would work. He just pushed, counted, pushed again. For 15 minutes. His hands were shaking, his arms were burning. He wanted to stop, but he did not. He kept pushing, kept counting. Until the ambulance arrived, the man survived, spent 2 weeks in the hospital. When he got out, he went to Marcus's house and thanked him, asked him where he learned to do that. Marcus said he read it in a book. The man laughed, said he owed his life to a book. Marcus did not laugh. He just nodded because he knew the truth. That book only existed because of a teacher who refused to quit. A teacher named Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, who kept teaching even after the school shut down, who gathered neighborhood kids in her living room and made them read, made them learn, made them believe that knowledge mattered, even when the world was falling apart. Marcus was one of those kids. He had been angry at the war, at the world, at everyone. His father had been killed at Pearl Harbor. His mother worked nights. Marcus had stopped caring about anything, but Mrs. Hayes showed up at his door one day and told him he was coming to class. He said no. She grabbed him by the arm and dragged him to her house, sat him down on the floor, handed him a book, told him to read. Marcus hated her for weeks, but she did not give up. She kept teaching, kept calling on him, kept making him read, and slowly something changed. Marcus started paying attention, started doing the work, not because he wanted to, but because Mrs. Hayes refused to let him quit, refused to let the war destroy him. That book he read, the one about the human body, the one that saved his neighbor's life. He read it in Mrs. Hayes's living room while bombs were being built a mile away and soldiers were dying overseas and the world was tearing itself apart. And years later, when Marcus became a teacher himself, he told that story to every class on the first day of school. He told them about the neighbor, about the book, about Mrs. Hayes, and he told them the same thing she told him. The world will try to break you. Do not let it. Keep learning, keep fighting, keep going. But not every small act led to survival. Sometimes they just delayed the inevitable. In 1945, a 12-year-old girl in San Francisco named Helen started writing letters to soldiers. She did not know any of them. She just wrote, told them about her day, about school, about her cat, about nothing important, just small talk, just reminders that life still existed somewhere. She sent dozens of letters. Most never got responses, but a few did. One soldier, a 20-year-old kid from Texas named Robert, wrote back. He thanked her for the letter, said it made him feel human, said the war made you forget what normal felt like. Helen kept writing. Every week, Robert kept writing back. For 6 months, they became pen pals. He told her about the fighting, about the fear, about watching his friends die. She told him about her life, about how scared she was, about how she did not know if the world would ever be okay again. He told her it would, promised her it would. In April 1945, the letters stopped. Helen kept writing, kept sending them. No response. She thought maybe he was busy, maybe the mail was delayed, maybe he forgot about her. She kept writing anyway, for 3 more months. In July, she received a letter, but not from Robert, from his mother. The letter said Robert had been killed in Germany. 2 weeks before the war in Europe ended. 2 weeks. He had been writing to Helen the night before he died. His mother found the letter in his pocket, unfinished. She finished it for him, sent it to Helen, thanked her for being kind to her son, said the letters meant everything to him, that he read them over and over, that they were the only thing that made him smile. Helen read the letter, then she walked to her room, pulled out the shoebox where she kept Robert's letters, all of them, every single one. She opened them, read them again, and she realized something. Robert had been lying the entire time. He said the war would be okay, that the world would be okay, that they would all survive. But he did not believe it. He was just trying to protect her, trying to give her hope when he had none left himself. Helen burned the letters, all of them. Watched them turn to ash in the backyard. Her mother asked why. Helen said because they were lies. Her mother said they were not lies, they were kindness. Helen said kindness does not stop bullets. Her mother did not have an answer for that. Helen never wrote another letter, never tried to comfort another soldier, never reached out to another stranger, because she learned what everyone learned eventually, that the small acts did not save anyone. They just made you feel like you were doing something when you were not. They just made the war a little more bearable while it killed everyone you tried to save. The war took so much, and the small acts of humanity fought back. But most of the time, they lost. Most of the time, The war won anyway, and the people who tried to fight it with kindness and hope and love were left standing in the ruins wondering if any of it mattered, wondering if they should have done more, wondering if there was ever anything they could have done at all. August 14th, 1945. Japan surrendered. The war was over. People poured into the streets. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, everywhere, dancing, crying, kissing strangers. The photographs show smiling faces, relief, joy, victory. But those photographs do not show the children, the ones who spent years waiting for bombs that never came, the ones who hid in shelters, who learned to duck and cover, who watched their parents break, who grew up too fast and could not go back. The war ended, but for the children who lived through it, nothing ended. It just changed shape. Dorothy Edgers was 13 when the war ended. The same Dorothy who was thrown out of bed by the Pearl Harbor explosions, who watched the Arizona blow up, who spent 4 years flinching every time she heard a plane. When the surrender was announced, her mother cried. Her father opened a bottle of whiskey he had been saving since 1941. They celebrated. Dorothy sat in her room and stared at the wall. She did not feel relief. She felt nothing, just empty, like something inside her had been hollowed out and never filled back in. School started again in September. Teachers told the students to move forward, to focus on the future, to be grateful. Dorothy tried. She sat in class, took notes, did her homework, but every time a plane flew overhead, her body went rigid. Her hands started shaking. Her heart raced. She would close her eyes and count to 10, wait for the sound to pass. The other kids noticed. They thought it was funny, called her jumpy, called her crazy. Dorothy stopped going to class, started staying home. Her parents did not understand. They said the war was over. There was nothing to be afraid of anymore. Dorothy did not know how to explain that the fear did not leave just because the bombs stopped falling. By 1947, Dorothy had dropped out of school entirely. She was 15 years old. She got a job at a grocery store, stocking shelves, sweeping floors. She did not talk to anyone, did not make friends, just worked, went home, slept, repeated. Her parents were worried, but they did not know what to do. Nobody did, because nobody talked about what the war did to kids. Nobody called it trauma. Nobody called it PTSD. They just called it weakness. And you were supposed to get over it. Dorothy never got over it. She spent the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, avoiding crowds, hating loud noises. She married at 23, had 2 kids. But she never told them about Pearl Harbor, never told them what she saw, what she felt. She buried it, pushed it down, pretended it never happened. Until one day in 1991, 50 years after the attack, her grandson asked her what December 7th was like. Dorothy stared at him. Then she walked out of the room, locked herself in the bathroom, and cried for an hour. Her daughter knocked on the door, asked if she was okay. Dorothy said yes, but she was lying. She was not okay. She had not been okay for 50 years, and she never would be. The war created an entire generation of children who learned to bury their pain, who were told to move on, to be strong, to forget. And most of them did, or at least they pretended to. But the pain did not disappear. It just went underground, festered, rotted, came out in other ways. Robert Kinsler, the boy who ran toward Hickam Field during the attack, grew up angry. Not loud angry, quiet angry. The kind that simmers under the surface and never goes away. His father survived Pearl Harbor, came home. But he was not the same. He drank. A lot. He yelled. He hit. Robert learned to stay out of his way, learned to disappear. By the time he was 16, Robert was gone, dropped out of school, left home, never looked back. He joined the military in 1950 when the Korean War started. He was 18. He thought maybe the military would fix him, give him structure, purpose, discipline. It did not. It just gave him more trauma, more things to bury, more nightmares to ignore. Robert served 2 tours, came home in 1953, got a job, got married, had kids, but he was never present, never fully there. His wife said it was like living with a ghost, someone who looked like a person but was hollow inside. Robert's kids grew up afraid of him, not because he hit them, he never did, but because he was cold, distant, unreachable. When his son was 10, he asked Robert what the war was like. Robert looked at him and said, "Do not ever ask me that again." His son never did. And Robert died in 1998 without ever telling anyone what he saw, what he felt, what he carried. His children found his military records after he died, found out he had been awarded medals, commendations. They had no idea. He never mentioned them, never hung them up, just buried them in a box in the garage and forgot about them. But not all the children buried their pain. Some of them fought back. Some of them refused to let the war define them. Some of them turned their trauma into something else, something useful. Kevin Donovan, the 10-year-old who held his family together after his brother died, grew up to become a social worker. He spent 40 years helping families in crisis, helping kids who lost parents, helping people who were broken and did not know how to put themselves back together. He was good at it, really good, because he understood what it felt like to be shattered, to have everything fall apart and still have to keep going. But Kevin never healed, not fully. He spent his life helping other people while ignoring his own pain. His wife knew. She saw it. The way he flinched when the phone rang at night. The way he could not sleep. The way he woke up gasping for air from nightmares he would not talk about. She asked him to see a therapist. He refused. Said he was fine. Said he did not need help. But he was lying, and she knew it. In 1989, Kevin had a heart attack. He was 57 years old, survived, spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctors told him to reduce stress, to take it easy, to retire. Kevin ignored them, went back to work, kept going, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant falling apart. He worked for another 8 years, until his body gave out. Second heart attack. This one killed him. He was 65 years old. His wife found a letter in his desk after he died. It was addressed to his brother Michael, the one who died in World War II. The letter was dated 1943. Kevin had written it the day after he found out Michael was dead. He never sent it, just kept it, for 56 years. The letter said, "I am sorry I could not save you. I am sorry I was not there. I am sorry I am still here and you are not." His wife read the letter and realized Kevin had spent his entire life trying to make up for surviving, trying to justify why he got to live when his brother did not. And he never forgave himself, never let it go, never moved on. The war did not just kill the people who died in it. It killed parts of the people who survived. Marcus, the boy who saved his neighbor with CPR, became a teacher. He spent 40 years in the same neighborhood where Mrs. Eleanor Hayes taught him. He told his students about the war, about the fear, about the survival, about the small acts that kept people human. He was honest, brutally honest, He did not sugarcoat it, did not make it heroic, just told the truth, and his students loved him for it, because he did not treat them like kids. He treated them like people, like humans who deserved to know the reality of the world. But Marcus never had children of his own, never married. He said he did not want to, but his friends knew the truth. Marcus was terrified of losing people, terrified of caring too much, because the war taught him that everyone you love eventually dies. Everyone you care about gets taken away, so he kept people at arm's length, kept them close enough to help, but far enough that losing them would not destroy him. He spent his entire life teaching kids, loving them, caring about them, and then letting them go, because that was the deal. That was the only way he could survive. Marcus retired in 1995. He was 63 years old. His students threw him a party, gave him cards, gifts, told him how much he meant to them. Marcus smiled, thanked them, and then he went home, alone, to an empty house, with no family, no wife, no kids, just him, and the ghosts of everyone he ever lost. He lived for another 12 years, died in 2007, alone, in his sleep. His neighbors found him 3 days later. At his funeral, over 200 former students showed up. They told stories about how he changed their lives, how he inspired them, how he taught them to keep going no matter what. And every single one of them cried because they loved him, and he never knew, never let himself believe it, because the war taught him that love was dangerous, that caring meant losing, and he spent his entire life protecting himself from that pain. The children of World War II grew up. They had families, careers, lives, but they never forgot. They carried the war with them, in their bodies, in their minds, in the way they raised their kids, in the way they flinched at loud noises, in the way they hoarded food, in the way they could not throw anything away, in the way they never felt safe, never felt at peace, never felt like the war was truly over. And their children noticed, the baby boomers, born after the war. They grew up in houses where no one talked about the past, where parents had nightmares and would not explain why, where certain topics were forbidden, where the TV was turned off if war footage came on. They grew up in the shadow of something they did not understand, something their parents refused to explain, and it shaped them, made them question authority, question war, question everything, because they saw what it did to their parents, saw the damage, saw the scars, and they swore they would never let it happen again. But it did happen again. Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. The wars kept coming, and each time a new generation of children learned the same lessons. That war does not end when the fighting stops. That trauma does not disappear when the bombs stop falling. That the cost of war is not measured in casualties. It is measured in lifetimes, in generations, in the ghosts that haunt families for decades after the last shot is fired. The children of World War II are almost gone now. Most of them are dead. The ones who are left are in their 80s and 90s, fragile, fading, and most of them still do not talk about it, still carry the weight, still flinch when they hear planes, still wake up in the middle of the night gasping for air, still see the faces of people they lost, still hear the sirens, still feel the fear. But some of them talk now. Finally, after 70 years, they sit down with grandchildren, with historians, with anyone who will listen, and they tell the truth about what it was like, about what it cost, about what they lost, and every single one of them says the same thing. War does not make heroes, it makes survivors. And surviving is not the same as winning. Surviving is just living long enough to carry the weight, to pass it on, to make sure the next generation understands. So maybe, just maybe, they will find a way to stop it, to break the cycle, to end the wars before they create more broken children who spend their lives pretending to be whole. The war ended in 1945, but for the children who lived through it, the war never ended. It just became part of who they were, and they carried it every single day for the rest of their lives. These children grew up in a world where safety was a lie and childhood ended in a single morning. Their stories are not in most history books, but they shaped an entire generation. If you believe war history should be told through the people who lived it, not just the battles that defined it, subscribe. More stories like this are coming. Drop a comment with one word that describes how this made you feel. Just one word. I read every single one, and so does this community. And if you think more people need to hear what war actually does to families, not just armies, hit like. It's the only way YouTube shows this to anyone beyond this room. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.